So friends, today I'm talking to Sydney's well-loved thespian and actor, writer, director, theatre personality, Taufeeq Sheikh. And I'm talking to him not about him, really, but about a new creative platform that has been set up in Sydney. And the name is Crossover Stories. And possibly this is, I think, the first interview that Taufeeq is doing about his new platform. And I wanted to discuss with him the philosophy behind the platform, because there are many platforms and how this would be something different that people would like. So Tawfiq, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, Abhijit. It certainly is feeling a little weird to be on the other side of a conversation. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for listening in, viewers.
My pleasure, absolutely. Now, when the first question is, when did you decide to launch a creative platform like this, and why did you do it? Because there are platforms here in Sydney, different
Yeah.
houses, production houses, and so on.
Abhijit, when I started my journey, or restarted rather my journey in Sydney, right at the start, I was able to break in into the larger mainstream Australian theatre crowd. And I was fortunate enough and pleasantly surprised of the level of acceptance and the level of inclusion that I was experiencing as I started my theatrical journey in Australia. Right at that moment, it shedded off quite a few biases that I had in my mind about how difficult it will be for a brown person to break into, which is perceived as a predominantly white industry. And as much as there is some element of truth, it is certainly blown out of proportion. And that's what my take was. I carried on with the best that I could deliver and how much ever I could learn in that journey and then keep doing better. And the acceptance only grew, and touch wood for that. While I was in that journey, my colleagues, my friends from the South Asian backgrounds always had this thing that what you're doing is something miraculous or something unexpected or incredible. As much as it was a great opportunity for me to take that compliment, somewhere down the line, I was feeling guilty to take that compliment on. Because I did not do anything incredible. I just did what was required to do. And that kind of got me thinking of what could I do different, just not pursue with my career. And I was mulching on that idea for maybe a couple of years before which suddenly an epiphany happened that we have been telling our stories in our own languages, which is great, which is creating a lovely echo chamber, which is helping us uphold our culture. What's lacking is how do we tell our stories to the larger Australian crowd? So that was the
Mm.
idea of creating a platform where we will be able to tell stories which will go beyond the echo chamber that we have created for ourselves as South
Mm.
Asian artists. The name came much later.
Yeah, that was my next question. In fact, that name is intriguing and and interesting too. When I first saw the name, and I thought that's very interesting. And to an extent, I think you have sort of expressed or explained. But tell me something more about the name. Yes, the crossover stories.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes to deadline, I had to kind of send in a name, and I was just asking everywhere around, and suddenly one suggestion popped up. Why don't you name it Crossover Stories? And I was like, yeah, fine, fine, that's the name, and I'll send it through. And putting no thought into mind, I just send that across, and then I sat and mulched on it. That in that funny, hattered, scattered, anxious moments of haste, just a name came in which pretty much summarized everything that I said before. While
Mhm.
for your first question, summarize that in one word is
Yeah.
that if we want to make our presence felt, if we want our stories to be heard, we have to cross over.
Mm.
One of the ways to do that would, of course, be tell our stories in English. Yes. However, at the same time, this would be an opportunity for the larger Australian creative crowd to come and collaborate with South Asian artists.
Mm,
And that will eventually help the talent pool that we have as South Asian artists in Australia to
mm,
collaborate and grow and share the legacy of art that we carry. So the technique, the discipline, the approach of theater, mm, combined with the legacy of South Asian arts, I really feel there is a great potential of creating some really good art and expressing some great stories. So crossover stories is a humble start that way. Then my ambitions were very small, that that would be the name of my radio show and eventually my podcast.
mm, mm,
Um, but then the name was something which resonated with the politics of my art, if I may use that term. And
mm.
I wanted to just use that as an umbrella, as a parent name to pretty much what I do, because it resonates with what sort of art I wish to create.
So that's how it is different from the other production platforms that are there already, or creative platforms in our community. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, we are all storytellers, and we tell it with our
Hmm.
purpose. And I just wanted to define my purpose a little more clearly. And I wanted to make sure that when I collaborate with artists of South Asian, or for that matter, the larger Australian crowd and the multicultural Australia that we have, is that we need to make our objective clear that we are telling a story which has to be heard for a wider audience. And we are in that way sensitive and aware of the way we should tell our stories.
Now, this the crossover stories, is it only is it only for theater, or do you have a larger or wider a vision of crossover stories? Because creativity is everywhere in different
Agreed.
ways.
Agreed. I've always believed, sir, that right from the moment we are born till the time we take a last breath, we tell stories in one format or the other.
Mm,
A child will cry and tell the story of its hunger. An old person will sit and gaze at the other person in silence and telling the story of his isolation and his solitude, that he wants company. So silence is also a story. Shout is also a story. A stroke on a canvas is also a story. Um,
mhm.
a manipulation of a puppet is also a story.
Yes.
Something that we see on screen is also a story. Something that we hear on a podcast is also a story. Something that
Mm.
we're sharing in a conversation in a way is also a story.
Yep.
So when we set out to tell stories, it's a matter of how do you put your thought into words, and that's where I believe crossover stories will be focusing on, is inviting artists, people from daily walks of life who want that opportunity to say exactly what they think. Because one of this common phrase that we use in Hindi is "mera wo matlab nahi tha." That's not what I
Mm,
meant,
mhm, mhm.
but we say it nonetheless. So crossover stories is an attempt for individually artists and collectively art groups to be able to present your art in a format that it is universally accepted. Even if you don't have universal audience, at least it is universal in its approach.
So yes, I was thinking, because your philosophy is across creativity. So therefore, I do see an opportunity where you can bring together different storytelling media and mix things like painting and theater together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
100%.
there's stuff like
100%.
that, which is an amazing possibility.
Cinema does that brilliantly. Cinema is
Mm,
basically a
mm,
collaboration of so many art forms into one, and that's how a
yeah.
film is made. I believe theater can also do that, where you've got the physical form, and then you've got the literature, and then you've got the audio.
Yes.
End of the day, it's the expression, it's the creativity of a person that has to tell a meaningful story, and that's what crossover story will attempt to do: give meaning to a person's story.
Yes. I mean, look, my stories which are coming to stage is one of your first projects from Crossover
Mhm.
Stories,
Yes.
and it's great. I mean, I'm truly indebted in that matter that you have taken up, and hopefully the audiences will see more creativity, if that's the
I
phrase,
see where you're coming from. Yeah.
from from Crossover Stories. As you said, where stories from different people will come on stage in different forms, or might come on the canvas in different forms or different forms of theater. If that
100%.
is if that is what crossover stories is going to do, then it is truly an exciting journey ahead for sure.
One of the reasons of bringing stories by Avijit Sarkar under the crossover stories was the platforms that we have tried to cross over is exactly how you've written the stories as well. We are not uh, a close knit society. We have a lot of crossovers, if I may use that term, in
Yes.
our own existence. And
Mm.
if we realize that's what your stories are conveying in a way, be it your story which is dealing with personal relationships or it's dealing with a social commentary, there is an overlap of cultures in every story,
Mm.
which is great because this entire project could have been done, let's say, for with one or two directors with probably 7 to 8 actors, or maybe 10 for that matter. However, the reason of taking it further, for the fact that now we have 5 directors and 27 actors doing
Mm.
exactly the same 5 stories, it is an example of how we are collaborating. And once we tell more to the audience about who the directors are and what the backgrounds of the actors are, it will only reinforce the idea that crossover stories is essentially crossing those bridges that initially we spoke about.
Yeah, but you're not only bringing together actors and directors in this project, you're also bringing together other creatives, isn't it? People who are experts in media, experts in design, and so that actually underlines the philosophy of crossover stories. Truly does.
Absolutely. And you've touched on an interesting point, sir, because imagine if you are a school going person who's getting ready for your first presentation, or you've just finished your university and you're going for your first interview, or
Mm.
you're a professional and you're sitting in a boardroom and you have to give a presentation of your ideas, or if you're a CEO who wants to sway the board members with your speech and your investors with your speech, you have to tell an impactful, meaningful story.
Yeah.
Everybody is a storyteller as we are born, but that storyteller somewhere down the line takes a back seat as we grow up. Crossover stories is an attempt for bringing that storyteller back again, giving that storyteller a life. And somewhere down the line, it resonates with my own personal journey, because for almost 15 years I was under a sabbatical. For 15 years I did nothing, and then 2018 suddenly the opportunity struck, and I realized how much of a change that had in me, and how my personality changed once I took up my expression again. And that's something which I felt that even if there is a bunch of people who are there who are in their professional lives who said, oh, if I was not doing this, I would have been an event manager, I would have
Mhm.
been a production designer, I would have been an actor, I would have been a writer, I would have been a painter. um, Australia, fortunately, is a country which allows you to do that in the way the lifestyle is. And I'm only trying to be a part of that equation where a person finds the storyteller inside them. And I am fortunate enough to be a part of that journey in exploring that storyteller within them.
That's great. You briefly spoke about not only theater, but you're talking about a radio station or other social media platforms where you're going to probably expand crossover stories. Tell us something about that. What other things are you thinking about?
Thanks to my start of the journey, which was along with Manbir Bhai on Kehte Sunte 89.3 FM, I literally started writing stories for radio. Before that, I was telling stories to clients to sell products, and I did not know where it's going to go. For the 2.5 years that I continuously did present on Kehte Sunte, I I was very fortunate for with the reception that I received with for the stories that I was saying. I have been telling these stories in Hindi and Hindustani. Um, so there is a large part of the audience that I'm not able to reach out to with the stories that we have. And because emotions are universal, that's where I wanted to take Kehte Sunte, and crossover stories would be the English leg, if I may put it that way. And at the same time, bring over people who have stories to tell. And I believe we are at that point that South Asians have probably lived and establish themselves as a very impactful demographic in Australia. And I want to bring it on record. I want to bring it, I want to show it to the wider country. I want to show it to the world of what we as South Asian artists are doing, as at the same time, what we are doing in our daily lives, in our corporate lives, in our professional lives, and how our story as South Asians have contributed to what Australia is today. 10 years back, only when I had, or 13 years back when I landed, Australia was a different country. It was on the cusp
Mm.
of change, and now we can see that change explode.
Ah,
I
yes.
believe it is a great time for us to document these success stories, to
Mm,
inspire the
mm,
coming generations, and at the same time, giving hope to the new migrants that there is a lot that we can achieve, because others before us who had much more tougher conditions to deal with have been able to establish. So that will be the humble attempt of crossover stories. And at the
yes.
same time, for the South Asian audience, my purpose will be where I can speak to experts in the field of arts, professionals in the field of films, theater, radio, television, bring them on board and speak to them and see how I can create some sort of stories where people will listen and get the idea, or at least a pathway to how to approach their ambitions. Because as an artist, it is very important that you need to have entrepreneurial skill sets as well, because
Absolutely.
without that, you can be taken for a ride, for a lack of a
Mm.
better term.
Oh, yes, for sure. From my experience, yes, that's one thing that hasn't changed in the last 45 years that I've seen, is that being taken for a ride. Yeah, definitely. It's still there.
Already vision where I'll be having you, and instead of having one of those conversations where we are trying to put 45 years of your experience into one episode, which will be unfair to the audience as well as your journey. I would rather break it down in terms of how did you have commercial success in your art? How did
Mhm.
you choose one work over the other? Who did you meet? And
That's
these are the kind of questions that I would want to ask, which are very basic and very elementary for people to take the next step or the first step in their creative journey without having to compromise their established life that they have already
mm,
created, which is the more
yes,
key point, because that risk
yes.
is tremendous
Oh,
in the
yes,
minds of people.
absolutely. So it sounds all very, very exciting and very promising,
it
if
is
you
all
ask me.
it is all thoughts, and while these thoughts were mulching on its own ideas, I was just glad that you trusted your stories under crossover stories banner, that I was able to kind of do that. And hopefully, with this production, while we have so many artists and so many amazing directors who have actually come on board, I'll be able to share their stories as a start, and their motivations of coming on board. And that would be the first few conversations I'd like to have on the Crossover Stories podcast program.
Excellent. That I'm looking forward to that one. So crossover stories really comes to on it in its own on in February 2023
Yes,
with a
that will
big
be the
project that you've
first
taken up.
official live performance launch, the maiden launch, and I really hope that the brilliant audience base that you have created, who have followed your journey in Australia, come and support your theatrical journey as much as they come to encourage all these 27 actors, 5 directors. So we've got a team of around 45 people that will be presenting this show to the audience of Sydney.
It's a huge project. There's no doubt about it, but an exciting one, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure the audiences will quite understand and appreciate what crossover stories is doing in that sense. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure,
Thank you, sir.
not only talking to you, but understanding what crossover stories is, and I'm sure the audience is now intrigued of
And
what
if at
crossover
all I
stories
have
are.
left the audiences with more question than answers, I'll be more than happy to answer them individually as well.
Sure.
And in your comment section, anything that comes up, I'll be more than happy to personally address them.
Great. So, friends, watch this space. Crossover Stories is coming to you, and we'll see much more than theatre under this banner or the creative platform. Thank you, Taufeeq. Thanks for your time, and it was a fantastic conversation.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Avijit, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.